I'm Chad Rutherland,
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
and welcome to NOCLIP Pocket. Live in your world, play in ours. Today, we're going to be talking about Accounting Plus, which was developed by Crows, and Squanch Games, and was released in 2018. We played the PlayStation VR version of this game, but it also was released a little bit after its initial release on PC. And probably some other weird VR platforms that nobody knows anything about. And by no one, I mean just not us.
Labo port pending.
Yeah, of course. I don't know how to describe Accounting Plus as far as like a genre goes. It falls into that like VR tech demo world.
Yeah, I've heard it described as an escape room puzzle game
I'll count
experience.
it.
Yeah. But no, you're right. It is more of one of the air quotes VR experiences. It's max. You could probably get an hour and a half out of it in one playthrough. It depends on how much you stop and look at stuff.
Right, and how many different things that you try. As far as like puzzles go, there's not really a whole lot of like meat there to keep you going.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I wanted to bring up was that on the Deracine episode, we talked about how, go listen to the Deracine episode, by the way, about how the VR in that game versus in a lot of other games, JJ in particular, he's not really here to defend himself on this one,
Right.
but said that he said that the limiting factors of VR made moving around in like a space seem really difficult and not really engaging.
Clunky.
Yeah, and this game is what he kind of described as being in the strengths of VR, where it is you stand in one location and interact with things around you. I would say I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, you can jump to a couple of different points usually in any given space, any given room you're in, but you are largely just kind of standing in one spot and looking around and seeing what you can interact with. It also gets around the disembodied hands thing by just making them cursors, and which I think actually is way better. Like, I find myself not thinking about it nearly as much when they aren't like representations of actual human hands.
Right, like human hands.
Yeah, they become like a controller where like I kind of forget about them, which is weird because you wouldn't think that.
Because it's so...
At first, it's like so weird and kitschy, and it just kind of then fades away. So I have to give it props for that.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. I think I didn't... Because I never really noticed the human hands being super distracting, except in a few instances.
There's a huge eyesore for me.
But I did notice, I wanted to make note and ask about that this time around, because as I was watching you, I was like, oh yeah, these are the big cursors and shit, which I didn't even really remember.
Yeah.
So
it's one of the things I remember the most about this game, actually. For whatever reason... The motion control VR hands are a big sticking point for me.
Yeah. Also notable in this game, you have like way more. I'm comparing this to Deracine, which isn't really like good. It really, in comparison to most VR games that put you in an actual space, there's a lot more here that you can interact with, even if most of them are just sort of like simple physics objects. But it makes it feel like a lot more interactive. It feels like an actual space because you can pick anything up and throw it around and move it and whatever.
Yeah, most things can be interacted with. I don't think it's literally everything, but it's enough of the things that you would think to grab.
Yeah, it's anything that's like a handheld object. Like, you're not pushing bookcases out of the way, but you can pick the books up off the shelf.
Right. One thing that this game manages to do that we kind of complained about in Deracine is that it does not put a highlight around objects that you can pick up. And I think that I remember thinking that wasn't that big of a deal when we recorded the episode. Like, JJ made that observation. But then playing through this, I do. It does feel a lot better that you can just pick up anything, and there's no like kind of prompt or glowy outline that indicates it's a thing you can pick up. And I think this game's able to get away with it because it's got like smaller, more tightly controlled areas. But like, I definitely think that adds more to the game feel than I would have expected.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. But the other thing is that putting the outline around things that are interactable really kind of fucks with like the idea of it being like a puzzle game, because if it highlights the objects that are important, it kind of does away with a lot of the actual thinking that you have to do. And so that, I don't know, I think it benefits it in that way as well. Whereas the Deracine highlight, like a lot of things go into your inventory, it's more of an adventure game style, using the correct inventory items on stuff type of interaction. So.
Right. And we've been comparing this a lot to Deracine because that's the other VR game we just talked about on the podcast, but they really couldn't be more different.
No.
This game is a comedy game, and it gets kind of meta. Even though VR is like brand new, it gets kind of like a little bit into the player psychology of it if you get into some of the secret areas.
Sure.
And for me, like usually when I'm like by myself playing a game, it's really hard for like something to make me laugh, like whether it be a book or a TV show or whatever, like laugh out loud. But like this game, I think is genuinely like that funny that I never played it by myself, but I'll find myself thinking about the game later by myself and then laughing to myself. So like I think that's like a pretty impressive feat that it manages to be that funny.
Yeah, I mean, it was co-created by people who are responsible for Rick and Morty. Justin Roiland specifically did a lot of the voice acting and also the writing. And
it shows.
Yeah. Not only in the fact that the game makes oblique references to that in its own world, but in addition to all of that, the I don't know, like Justin Roiland's voice is one of those things that is just like absolutely unmistakable. Like he's a voice actor. Like that's his like career, like one of his job titles.
Right.
In addition to like, you know, whatever producer, writer, that kind of thing. But he really only has like 3 or 4 voices, maybe.
Yeah, he's got a very distinct way of speaking. Is I think the most identifying factor, and that's a lot of his humor comes from that, or maybe not a lot, but like enough of
the way that he writes as well, like sort of bleeds into that. It's hard to differentiate like the character from what he would actually say in a real situation.
Yeah, like the tree guy sounds exactly like Morty.
Yeah. And not only that, but like they did probably a good decision in the end, but they made him sort of the focus of the advertising for this game. And it's such a good choice because it's such a dumb character design, all things considered. But he introduces you to the way that this game like is going to behave in a way that I can't imagine anything else that was still like representative advertising succeeding in.
Yeah, and the first instance of the tree world is really emblematic, I think, of the whole game, where it's presenting you with these environments that you can interact with, but it's constantly berating you with a distraction. And I feel like that's kind of the core of the game, is just seeing how well you can like balance like, what am I supposed to pay attention to? Am I supposed to, you know, like what's going on, and your ability to like take in that information.
Yeah, even further than that, like so you mentioned earlier that the game has sort of like a meta commentary to make about things, and it goes further than just that, because it's also the whole concept of like this game from like a top-down perspective is the player going layers deep in VR by repeatedly putting on more and more VR goggles. And so there's this meta narrative element to it about VR, but then on top of that is also just the like VR in VR literal meta concept that they have. And so it's really hard to sort of like wrap your head around what the fuck is happening half the time, and that is entirely by design, and I think succeeds pretty much all the way through.
Yeah, it feels almost like an Inception parody kind of thing.
I think they literally even bring up the movie Inception during somebody's dialogue at some point.
Yeah, and you can escape by killing yourself in certain levels. But yeah, you're always like going down layers or coming back layers out of the in or out of the VR realms.
Right. So, one of the main like sort of the reason that a lot of people know about this game is because of there's this underlying like ARG element that was put in into sort of like it was put into the game in updates and then also has been talked about publicly, so there are a lot of people who have been kind of drawn in by all of this. And the game really sort of like wants it to be a focus when you're replaying it, where there are all these people talking about like the zoo level, and then like you can do certain things in the game. They added items that let you get to new worlds and shit. So all of that's basically a lie from what I've been told. My understanding of this is that they started this whole thing, put in a bunch of secret codes, and none of them go anywhere or do anything, and that is hysterical to me.
Yeah, there's the level where you're in the dungeon with the king of VR.
Yeah.
And you can find the yellow pill, which will take you to like the conspiracy office, with the bulletin board with all the yarn.
Right.
And with the character in the game who's obsessed with finding the zoo level, or once again we're getting very meta. There's someone in the game who's like talking about all the ARG stuff and trying to find the level. And I went to that level this most recent time playing it and just ran out all the dialogue, like trying to see if I could figure anything out, like how to advance from that level to something that did not involve taking the red or the blue pill. But I was unsuccessful.
Yeah, there's that. No, like, I honestly don't. Like, I don't know. I believe in my heart of hearts that there's just nothing there.
I was kind of on the fence about it until I just played through it, and I'm like, it really doesn't seem like there's anything there.
Mm-hmm. It's just like, I feel like it's almost just the cherry on top of how absolutely whacked out this game can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like that a lot. I mean, all the rip, the F's in the chats, the big yeets for all the people who spent a bunch of time trying to figure out all this stuff.
Yeah.
But man,
I feel like if it were me, on like the 2-year anniversary of the game, I'd like update it and put it in without telling anybody. Yeah, and then just wait for how long it took somebody to find it after that. Because I love that. This has been we've talked about this before, and it's been talked about by plenty of other people. That feeling of like being a kid on the playground again and talking about like rumors about secrets in video games. Like it really gives you that feeling. In a way, this is like a new way, at least to me, that's like unique to games, by just like slapping it right in the game itself and having the characters like wigging out about the actual real world things the developers said about there being secrets in the game. And it really makes you want to look for it. And like,
I have to applaud that sort of idea as well, for the sake of, back in the day, there'd be tons of times where you would like you would, get into your parents' minivan and have them drive you to a friend's house where you would like sit there and play like Killer Instinct or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like just play some video games together. And that was like a thing that kids did when they hung out.
Right.
And that's such not a thing anymore. Like I feel like a lot of people, I mean, maybe for kids, but the kids who did that have now grown up, and a lot of games focus more on like the online experience.
Right.
So things where it's kind of like you're hanging out with your friends, but you're both sitting in your own rooms, miles and miles apart, talking over Discord. Check out our new Discord, by the way. Link in the description. And there's like that captures some semblance of it, but I feel like VR has this unique new opportunity to give that nostalgic feeling back to people, because I know, like, because I know maybe one or two other people who have a VR setup, and so you do get that experience of somebody coming over because they don't even have access to the thing.
Right, to check it out.
Yeah, and Accounting is one of the games that I've had a lot of people play because it's like a short experience. It's something that's like innately really funny, and so the fact that there's stuff in there that makes you like want to be like, oh, what about this thing over here? What happens if you do this other thing?
You always want to see if the new person you're showing it to is going to find something you haven't seen yet.
Right.
Yeah, dude. I definitely, you remember, like, it's just weird talking about this. It just made me think, it's kind of off topic, but like just how much time you had as a kid, and like you just had like no perspective for it, because like you just like boot up a game and you would spend like a couple hours just like trying to figure out if there was a way to get the Triforce and Ocarina of Time, and that was like your whole evening.
Right.
Just like whatever, just boot up the game and run around in it and do nothing. I wish I had that kind of time.
I know. I mean, you're talking to somebody who's played Resident Evil 4 in like the double digits number of times, and like a lot of that was just like, I know how to play this game, so rather than seek out any new experiences, I'll just play through it again.
Well, no, the thing that's certainly falls under this umbrella as well, but like I don't know if you ever did this sort of thing, but like I would just boot up a game and not even make any kind of progress in it, like just play around in it, trying to do shit.
I feel like the advent of 3D games made me probably do that a couple of times for sure.
You just want to like be in the game world for a while.
Yeah, just kind of run around the overworld.
Yeah.
This is what bring overworlds back.
Yeah. But we can get back on topic now. It's enough reminiscing.
It's just, this is the Good Time Reminiscence podcast. Yes. That's all. I mean, as far as off topic goes, there's not really a game more apt to it than this one. Every individual world is entirely removed from each other one for the most part.
Yeah, they some of them reference each other.
Yeah, they do talk about it. They also have to like potentially like keep the scope of what layer you're on as well. Because like the courtroom scene, which references you killing the King of VR, is on the same level as the King of VR one, and the summoning Satan and the Bone Zone are on the same level.
Right.
So yeah, it's a little wacky for sure. But even like in that same thing, like, I don't cancel this whole thought, I guess. I don't know how to say anything about this without just being like, it's just insane.
Yeah, I mean, it gets us. I love that it goes in like I don't know if I want to call it dark, because it always remains humorous, but it goes in like a darker direction if you go through one of the paths where I think you have to plant the seed in the tree world, and then when you make it back around to the tree world where it's on fire,
right,
you can pick a fruit off of the little small tree that's grown in, and it's got a headset that you put on, and that takes you to this world where you're in a room with this like giant, long-limbed, like creepy. Like, he almost gives me, like, Bottom of the Well, to bring up Ocarina of Time again. Like,
Oh, right.
You know, like, some kind of, like, weird, fleshy, bloody guy who, like, he's, like, hunched over. He's, like, as big as the room, and he's got, like, a headset on. And he's talking about the game, like, and how much he loves it and how many times he's played it. And you're just kind of like in there, and you have to like take the headset from him, and it's just like super weird and creepy. Like, you do not expect that to happen.
There are definitely a couple of things in this game that are just like very grotesque in a way that like viewing it on a television is not the same thing as being in VR.
No, like I watched several people play this before I ever got the chance to play it myself. And everything looks a lot bigger in the game. Like, all the characters, like, from your perspective are, like, way bigger than I was thinking from watching other people play it, which was weird.
I mean, that's, like, a thing with first-person games. I think that they, like, intentionally exploit that in VR, where it feels like, there's never consistency in your character height, which, I mean, I guess makes sense. Characters aren't the same height, but... in accounting specifically, you seem very small.
Yeah.
And it makes these like the King of VR was the first one that like you run into where it's just like, this is like, you're uncomfortably close to this guy. And there's just turds all over the place.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're in his weird dungeon.
Yeah, his creepy weird dungeon.
It definitely like creeps you out in certain ways, and I like that. It takes advantage of the medium, like putting weird and uncomfortable things right in your face.
Right, and it's
like experimental, but I think it works. I like the result.
Well, that's because I've played two examples that come to mind of other games that are explicitly going for horror. Are that Rush of Blood, the roller coaster shooty gun game,
the Until Dawn tie-in,
yeah, and Killing Floor, the one that's the like zombie wave based shooter from PC that got ported, and now there's a VR version of it, and both of those games go for these sort of like jump scares and things like impending approach.
Yeah, those are more like action horror,
right,
and less survival horror.
True, but this isn't either of them. No. This is a game about jokes and making poop jokes and fart jokes and dick jokes predominantly.
Yeah,
and this game has had much more effective sort of menacing moments because you're sitting in there where there's no danger to the player character or to you, and it's just skeeving you out the whole time.
It does that. I guess you could compare it to like Rick and Morty. It has like that cartoony facade, and it layers the like creepy elements in there and deep enough that like you kind of like are peeling it back to find like something you don't expect. Like, it's a nice incorporation of horror elements.
Yeah,
it's done real well for for what it is.
Yeah, because it can't ever stray too far.
Yeah, like it's never scary, in my opinion, but like it's definitely like just weirds you out and like creeps you out in different ways that you don't expect.
Yeah,
definitely want to give it props for that.
Good shit.
Are you out of things to talk about?
I'm sort of out of things to talk about.
The only other thing I would want to talk about would maybe be like if you want to like call out a favorite vignette maybe and talk about it, but if you're not into that idea, we can just kind of wrap it up.
It's difficult for me to pick out some like some of my favorites, but like a lot of this game, like the visuals I think are really good overall, but obviously simplistic, and the details they chose to put in are less like, I mean, obviously, if you got into the ARG thing, this is probably blasphemy, but I feel like the detail in the game isn't super, like, deep. Like, like it's not exploratory detail. It's just stuff that adds a little character to the environment. And I feel like the sound design really picks up tons and tons of slack, because between the voice acting, because they have professional actual voice actors as well as writers for those, and the whole concept of the game allows them to sort of couch it in this like really short vignette style, and allows the jokes to be delivered and land better. So I feel like, taking all of that into account, one of my favorite vignettes in the whole thing has to be the summoning a demon one, because I love both the characters that are there, and I love all of the like the unique music that was created for this section, both the like hysterical summoning a demon rap, and also like the bad like death metal mixtape thing,
right? And the fact that there's like a parody of McDonald's behind you at all times.
Yeah, the whole time.
One of my and I like before I move on from that, one thing I like about that one is it's got levity the whole time, but the still like the idea that like you're summoning a demon, and like the environment and the way like it's portrayed is uncomfortable in a way like that I liked.
Yeah,
I don't really have anything deeper to say about that, but just to reiterate what we were saying before about how the game's good at making you uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it does that thing where it layers sort of that menacing tone over top of jokes, like just jokes,
or underneath of jokes, or whatever.
Yeah,
it's a sandwich.
Yeah, it's underneath. And then in the middle, there's a guy wearing a costume with a price tag on it that says "Cool Night."
Yes.
And then the demon hand comes up and crushes everything, which is all good in that order.
Yeah, I think my favorite vignette in terms of how like the entire experience is probably the first one with the gang.
Oh yeah.
I like that there's like a group of characters, and they like are not only reacting to the things you do, but they're also like riffing off each other. Like there's a nice dynamic there. And it feels more like it maybe has more going on, or like it's more like of a rounded experience or something. Yeah, because it's got the characters like interacting with each other as well as you.
Yeah, it makes it feel more natural.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because it does, like, with the exception of the fact that obviously if you pick up the same thing multiple times, they'll repeat the dialogue. Again. But as long as you don't do that, which it doesn't give you like a ton of reason to do it, then it really does feel like things interacting in a way that it might even just kind of you might just bypass it the first time, just not even think about like that programmatically. That's actually pretty cool the way that everything worked out, even though it's kind of just sound clips being played.
Right.
They do a good job of masking everything.
Yep. No, that's probably like the biggest strength of the game, I think, is it's throwing enough at you constantly that you get immersed through that.
Right.
Even though you're doing like very video gamey puzzles, like you kind of forget about it.
Because you've got people yelling at you the whole time.
Yeah, it really kind of does successfully inject like a Rick and Morty episode into a game in a way that feels like natural.
Which the creators of this game are actually behind a VR Rick and Morty game that I feel like just looking at it. Like, accounting has something sort of special going for it.
Because it's a unique thing.
Yeah, and, like, I remember looking at the, like, art, like, the advertisement for virtual Rickality and being like, that's a hard pass. Like, I don't know. I think maybe...
It feels too forced.
Yeah, I might be a little bit poisoned on unlicensed stuff growing up in the 2000s, though.
Yeah.
Do we have those final thoughts? I'm trying to do some new things with the final thoughts.
It looked like you were trying to like emulate like a snake. You're just like
I am a
no
snake,
one can
Andy.
see what I'm doing because this is an audio format.
Imagine two snakes podcast. Imagine one snake podcasting futilely with his tail. We're the Ouroboros of podcasts.
So I guess my final thoughts would be like I have not played very many VR games since the VR is yours, and I'm not buying VR games for it.
I have VR.
Yeah, so I've just played a few things that you have, but this is definitely a standout for sure. This is the two games we've talked about, Deracine and this, are probably my two favorites, with Superhot being like right underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's like I was getting at before. This game is genuinely funny in a way that not a lot of games are. It's experimental also, as I said, which I think is important when the medium is so young, that they're like doing weird things and taking chances. And I think they're successful with a number of things they try. So I'd like to see more things like this with like a strong like direction. You know, like this game had the Rick and Morty humor angle, and what's the guy's name?
Justin Roiland.
Yeah, like you can clearly feel his influence on it, and I just think that it works really well.
Yeah, I don't know if Dan Harmon, who's the creator of Rick and Morty, had anything to do with this one, but I know that I guess there have been sort of some game related projects going around that office for a while, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's been a hand in it from a lot of people, a lot of the creative people on that show. I feel like we talked a lot about sort of my final thoughts are going to be largely reiterating on points that we had before. So I do sort of just want to mention, like, one thing that you brought up is that this game is like a standout in VR, and I think that a part of that is also just entirely in its brevity. Like how short the game is.
Yeah.
Even though it has like intentionally inserted these like elements to make the game feel more replayable, this is going to go down with like PT and Home as games that I frequently will just have other people play because it's short and typically you get the reaction that you want from people from it.
Yeah, and it's wholly unique as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, if I'm trying to scare the shit out of somebody, I'll have them play PT. If I want to make somebody laugh, I can have them play accounting.
Yep.
But, yeah, that's about it. I give it plus.
Yes.
Yes.
An A+ for accounting plus.
Plus. Thank you for listening to NOCLIP Pocket.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, keeping in theme with Mystery May, on the rest of the podcast, on the big podcast, our little baby podcast, the baby brother of NoClip, is going to be talking about Simulacra, a game about a phone. I'm just going to splice in my awful description here. It's like a game. It's not a phone game. It's a game phone. It's a phone game.
It's a phonogram.
It's a phonogram. It's a game on the PC where you have a phone, and it's not your phone. It's somebody else's phone, and that person is missing, and you have to find them using the information on their phone. So join us for that next time. Until then, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. There you can find our email address, our Twitter, all of our old episodes, a link to our brand new Discord that I've already mentioned in the episode. Haha, double advertisement. And, go listen to all that shit. Let us know what you think about it. Let us know what you don't think about it.
Smash that like button.
Today, we're going to be talking about Accounting Plus, which was really, fuck me, all day long. 1, 2, 3.